Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome to another introduction of a Mastery Empowerment course with Jean Eng. This is the Arcturian Awakening from the Dream transmissions. Hi, Jean. Thank you for being here. We're excited for this one. How are you?
Hi, Laura. Yeah, it's great to see everyone here. Really excited for this as this kind of a new topic that I've been working on for quite a while.
So tell us about this, because this is where we're going to work with our guides and our teachers, the Arcturians and other awakened beings. So what is the preface for this course?
Yeah, I think the model is this idea of vertical versus horizontal transmissions or work on oneself. And our horizontal work is sort of the work on kind of the person we see in the mirror, the person when you call your name out, you think about, and that would be sort of like what I would call an accumulation of the personality self and the physical body. And I think that's important for us here, sort of in what I'm calling the dream state, in terms of relatively to our absolute state. So techniques such as manifestation or classes on manifestation, or even improving one's clairvoyance, one's healing ability, these are all in the horizontal dimension. The only issue with the horizontal dimension is somewhere deep in our subconscious, we recognize that that's a relative self. And this can lead to, is probably ultimately what leads to what we might call our dark night of the soul, in a sense that there's this sense of maybe even utter despair when one really looks at it very deeply. In some ways, we're distracting ourselves from looking at this question that I'm about to describe. And that's the sense that this horizontal self, our relative self, is finite. In some ways, it's going to come to an end. And, in a nice metaphor, it could be like we're having this movie, or when we go to the movies, we do recognize it's going to end. And if it's very exciting or a very happy movie, somewhere in the back of our mind, we know it's going to end. So there may be a bit of a sadness, but we try to distract ourselves by getting more involved in the movie. So actually, the Dark Night of Soul, as most people who either think about it or have gone through it, is actually our one breakthrough, because it allows us to maybe search at some point. Maybe we find in terms of what I'm calling the vertical dimension and the vertical self, and that's more this absolute sense of who we are beyond this personality self, beyond this dream state, beyond the body. And if we can have a direct experience of that, then that starts to help us work with this sort of existential question.
Does everyone have to have a dark night of the soul, or no? This is work that will help us bypass the dark night of the soul. Or what do you think? Is a dark night of the soul par for the course?
I don't think a person has to have a dark night of the soul, but I think this recognition of the vertical self is what a lot of people are calling awakening, or some kind of recognition that we're not just this finite self. It helps us to identify with what we might call unity consciousness, or our unconditional love state. And in some ways, when we have these experiences of love or bliss or dissolving of the personality self, that's another way of accessing the vertical dimension of oneself.
Okay, vertical dimension of oneself. And in that space, we will be able to work with our guides, higher beings, have an understanding that that's what we are, that we are multidimensional. Is that really the definition of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about how a guide might help someone. The thought process or thought experiment is to imagine that you're a spiritual being outside the space-time reality. You're kind of now someone's like helping spirit. And the issue is that if one's trying to awaken from this dream state, if we call this the dream state, and this is just one framework, then if you sort of help a person keep, like usually they're going to their guides, or oneself is happy when they get what they want or what they need, and then they're unhappy when they don't get what they want or what they need. But it's all within the dream reality. So if you're trying to wake them up, giving them always what they want or what they need may actually make them get further asleep. Whereas someone who awakens to this sort of reality as kind of a relative reality, as a dream state, may have gone through something where they feel they didn't get what they want and what they needed, so they began to search for something within. So sometimes the guides, sometimes what we're experiencing that may seem like a difficulty actually is the path to awakening. It can be.
Really, what we're doing is we're all in a dream. If we're unawakened, if we're unaware of this, it's an illusion. We're just in the dream. Is that what you mean by that? And so then awakening from the dream is awakening. And that's what we hear about what it means to awaken to this reality. So that goes kind of deep, and some might not understand exactly what that means, but it's very interesting. In your own awakening, do you still think that you're in a dream, or would you say that you are awakened from the dream?
I don't know if I've fully awakened from the dream. I think it's the direction that I think is the kind of spiritual path. So there's this sort of which is the third day, this kind of dichotomy, because we feel like we're here, and then some people have had experiences maybe that's shaken their sense that this is the only sort of game in town, so to speak, that they are somewhat a part of them, or an aspect of them isn't really here, that they've not just intellectually, but they've experienced themselves outside of space-time. And I think with the advent of a lot of spiritual technologies, particularly what I think of is this interest in plant medicines, more and more people are having experiences outside of their personality self. They may actually intellectually know that they would like to have an experience that exceeds the boundaries of their personality self and consciousness of a relative personality. But the question is then how, and then you can have an experience like that, whether it's through meditation or like a exogenous substance such as plant medicines. Then the question is, you don't stay there. You usually come back into this space-time world again. So how do you embody that experience of knowing that a deeper part of yourself is not really here, or is here but is not this, and while still having like a physical body, while still kind of interacting in the physical world?
On the subject of plant medicines, ayahuasca, for example, because where I am, and in many places around the world and in many states now, plant medicine is being more accepted. And because of that spiritual aspect, that we are having an experience outside of this relative self, there's incredible healing aspects there. For example, addictions. I've heard from several people that before they had issues with alcohol or dependency on certain substances. And after those experiences, they had no longer a desire for that addiction. And so that is becoming whole then. So instead of plant medicines, there could be the route of meditation, taking the stairs rather than the elevator in ascension consciousness. And so that's what these transmissions are geared to do then, is to bring us closer to these experiences, receiving downloads and codes from the Arcturians who are assisting us, and higher beings as well.
Yeah, I think in some ways our matrix is shifted by those experiences, whether it's a spiritual practice, altered states of consciousness, like through drumming or some other aspect like the binaural beats, or a little bit of a stronger experience like with the plant medicines, like you mentioned, ayahuasca. And I think in many respects, people, it's in a sense, it's having the direct experience of yourself as a spiritual consciousness, and then coming back into the physical space-time and recognizing that you're still here in this relative body and personality, and integrating those two experiences, in your life.
Yeah, integrating, that's the fun part, isn't it? And that's the transformational part. Okay. So we've got 3 sessions with you, and each of these focus on different things. The first one is our story and decreasing the chatter. Tell us about this one.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of the experience that people might have that starts to make them feel like how they can kind of get outside their mind in a way. So if one has had an experience where the mind is stilled enough, maybe that's through meditation. It could be through sports or some flow state activity with music. So it doesn't have to be in like what we traditionally call some type of contemplation. Then the mind becomes very still, and then the recognition is that usually where we are, what's kind of keeping this egoic state going is actually a commentary on our direct experience. So we're usually kind of talking about, it might be a subvocal, of course, what's going on, like how you might feel, how you might look, how you might be perceived about someone or something. Or it could be something you're hoping for. So I'm hoping to do this or hoping to do that. So it's always really an evaluation of the experience. But then no one's really telling you that that's not actually the experience. And so after you've done that for a number of years, a number of decades, that actually becomes your experience of yourself. So then that's sort of like a false sense of self, is that commentary.
All right. And so this transmission will assist us in stilling the mind and decreasing the chatter.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I talked about it here, but I was very interested in Wim Hof breathing, and one of the things in that is cold exposure. And if you are exposed to like cold, like I've found this experience, cold water, like a cold plunge, for a sustained amount of time, like a little bit over a minute, and you can calm your breath down. Because it's so intense, and probably because of the neurotransmitters going on, your mind becomes completely still. And so it's usually by having that experience that you realize, oh my gosh, like most of my time is just a commentary on my experience. Like most of what I'm spending my experiences is thinking about things rather than experiencing things. And then as soon as your mind stills this time because of the cold, you come to like a direct experience like of what I'm calling pure awareness, which is a much more vertical experience of oneself. And so some people can come through that through meditation, like they meditate long enough, they start to still their mind, and then they get a gap between two thoughts. And that's the same pure awareness state. Like maybe that gap becomes like 5 seconds, or like more than 1 second. So then they can really experience what it's like to not have a thought always on the screen of your mind. And so then you get a direct experience of something other than the story. So that's just been my own personal experience, and maybe some people might have experienced that in that way, or some other intense, very focused period.
Yeah, okay, cool. Now we know why the Japanese particularly love the cold baths. They do it for other reasons, but it makes perfect sense that it really does get us out of the mind. There's nothing to think about there, almost like a surrender. Okay, very cool, very cool. So the second session as well is no past, no present, and no future.
This was, popularized, or kind of more people on the planet in a very quantum way came to this understanding with Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. Of course, that wasn't the first time. I think different spiritual traditions have talked about, being in the present, in the here and now. And there's also kind of an ancient Buddhist practice called Mahamudra. And one of the practices is realizing or meditating on the idea that there's no past, no present, and actually no past, no future, no present, because that present is the storyline. Not that there isn't a here and now, but usually our present thoughts is some commentary on what's going, like, do I look right? Is my voice coming across? I'm just talking about my own thoughts, correctly. Am I saying the right thing? So these are all things kind of maybe in the background, but that we spend a lot of our energy and effort on. And then, of course, we might be thinking like, what's my next thing that I'm going to be doing? Like, is that all set? And so it's all there in the background, or you flip over to that, as well as you think of something in the past. But all these are actually present thoughts along the time dimension. They're all occurring in the present. So when those can be stilled, again, you get to that vertical point. So those are all in the horizontal dimension. And then if you can still those, you come to that pure awareness state. And it's a much deeper aspect of yourself. It's probably the aspect that if someone believes in reincarnations, that awareness state is kind of the constant in all your reincarnations. Like, we spent a lot of time probably in another incarnation thinking about our past, our present, our future. And then, of course, we pass from that physical body, and then that whole dream ends. And so that's the bigger question, is if that's all you can focus on, you realize it's quite relative. In fact, we probably don't even remember that past life really fully, even if we did a past life regression. But while we're there, we probably spend an inordinate amount of time on those relative ideas and thoughts, without recognizing perhaps maybe our vertical self. So by getting more in touch with the vertical self, it makes this relative self, we become more creative with this relative reality. We're more free of the fear of this relative reality.
Yeah, I love that. Free of the fear of this reality. It feels really fortifying, really empowering on the journey then to really be there. And so these sessions will have meditations and energies that you offer for assisting us to achieve that. We're going to experience a little mini session in a moment, but let's talk about the third session, resting in pure awareness then. So this is our chance to embody and stabilize this pure presence and awareness.
Yeah, and a little bit about the transmissions in terms of how that fits in terms of like other spiritual traditions that have this idea of the absolute reality or vertical reality is, and people probably can identify this with the quantum ideas of resonance. So because these are really states of consciousness, they're not really kind of objects. It's a state of consciousness, whether to be in that horizontal focus to the vertical focus. If you come into contact with a being who's has what is called that awakened mind, or who is more in the vertical state or in that pure awareness state, and you sort of merge your consciousness with theirs, then you can accelerate your you actually can enter that state of consciousness. In a lot of traditions, they call that guru yoga without really understanding. That's actually the spiritual or energetic mechanism, is you're actually merging your consciousness with a being's consciousness who is already in that state. And then your consciousness kind of accelerates to that state, even if it's temporary. So a lot of times what will happen, and we may have done this in other trainings, but you'll imagine this awakened being above your head, like let's say it's Jesus or like some angelic being or some Buddha being, and then you imagine that form sort of merging and coming down your central channel to your heart center, and then you try to enter that state where you're not thinking about the past or present, or you just try to enter the pure awareness state. And actually what's happening is your consciousness has gone into, if we speak quantumly, deep resonance with the consciousness that's already in that awakened consciousness. And so you almost like, it's a very accelerative technique. It's not the only technique, but it's one that a lot of traditions consider actually the quickest technique. It's almost like energetically modeling someone who's already in that state of consciousness that you're, trying to achieve. So that's in a bit what the transmissions are doing in this kind of new packaging or new way of doing kind of energy transmissions, but very similar to that kind of ancient technique of what they call guru yoga, or merging with kind of the master's consciousness.
Beautiful. So joining in these webinars gives us that experience to do that. And we've mentioned this before, as it goes quantum, maybe even just listening to this right now is preparing us to try it out, to be in a state, to practice a little bit before we get together and see what it's like to be in that state of consciousness with another awakened being. Anything else to say about these 3 transmissions before we experience a mini session?
Oh yeah, maybe the example, another like term that might be used for what we're discussing is the conceptual mind versus the non-conceptual mind. Like the conceptual mind is this thinking, like particularly in our culture, or the way we were raised, we're highly mental. Like we tend to want and need to understand things mentally or construct things mentally. And there's a story like in these non-dual traditions, which is another term for these awakening traditions, that people might have heard of. Milarepa was a kind of a Tibetan yogi, and he had a teacher called Marpa. And Milarepa, before he got onto the spiritual path, had a lot of like heavy karma. Like him and his mother had used all this black magic. This was back in the 800s and so forth, to like actually kill like about 30 of their own family members out of kind of anger and so forth. So by the time he got on the spiritual path, he had a lot of heavy kind of energies to process. So what Marpa did, rather than trying to kind of awaken him right away, which he wouldn't have been able to hold, had him do all these crazy things that we might think we're doing, the universe makes us do, or some spiritual teacher makes us do. So he had to make a building here, like a house. And then just like the next day was like, well, I don't really like it there. Why don't you tear that down and build it over here, a block over. So he did that because he was his teacher. And then he did that for like 3 times. And then by the 3rd time, like he's on the verge of actually, committing suicide. He's like going crazy. And then later on, Marpa just comes up. The way he actually awakens him is he realizes that he's ready to kind of hit this non-conceptual experience. And he takes off his sandals, the teacher, Marpa, and just hits him on the forehead. And then all of a sudden his mind stops and he enters that vertical dimension. And basically he, reaches an awakened state. Of course, he comes back and, becomes a great teacher himself. But, it's that it can happen instantly if the cause and conditions are correct. And this could be over many lifetimes. So people could have been really struggling with this idea and reincarnated a lot, because the reason a lot of the mechanisms of reincarnation is, this is just one perspective, it's not the only one, is that even in the astral realm, when you're outside your body, you're used to stories. It's like we like to go to movies. We're so used to the story that we can't hold in that absolute state. So even though we don't have a physical body, we're looking for a story. So it pulls us back into another incarnation. It pulls us back into another physical body. And then we kind of forget because of the process of incarnation. And then we somehow wake up in this baby body, or maybe by the time we're 3 or 4, we're kind of more conscious. But we still have this habitual tendency to like the story. We're always thinking of the future, thinking of the past, going after things we like, going after things, running away from things we don't. So at some point, when you really stabilize, it's that third transmission that you're mentioning, if you can really stabilize that, at first get a glimpse of like the mind slowing down enough so it's just purely aware, and then really hold that even when all things are going on. That's called stabilization of the kind of awakened state. Then even in what they call the bardo, in the in between, and you can practice this like we went over in sleep practice, sleep yoga and dream yoga. But if you can stabilize that awakened consciousness even after you pass from your physical body, then you could choose to kind of stay in the astral realm in that pure awareness state, or at least hold that. Or you could choose reincarnate, but you'd reincarnate sort of consciously with that awareness. So that's why some people, they come back kind of, we feel they're a bit more spiritual because they tend not to take this world so seriously. Somehow they subconsciously are kind of more happy-go-lucky, or they kind of recognize that, they remember themselves in the spiritual world. And so that's the capacity to kind of dissolve this habit of the story self and stick more to the absolute self. And then you have much more choice even in between lives.
Wow. Okay. That's mind-blowing, because it makes us ponder, talking about stories. Are we then, if this is the evolution of humanity, the evolution of consciousness, and it's an awakened state into godliness?
Yeah, I think that's the piece about how does it integrate back when you have those experiences into this life. I think from the outer point of view, you kind of look the same to a person, to just a normal first sight. You probably still do the same thing, like that book. I think you even may have mentioned it, like first chop wood and carry water, then you become enlightened, and then it's still chop wood and carry water when you come back. So you still kind of, meaning you still do the same things, like you still go and pay your taxes, and you may drive a car and buy a cell phone. Like you wouldn't be like flying around, in the ethers or something, although we did see something like that at Crestone. But that's just a joke. But the thing is, your state of consciousness is different. And when you interact with a person like that, the kind of things that could happen, like the little quirks and upsets and so forth, they kind of just let those things go. They always realize that all of this is a little bit like a big cosmic, not to make it degrade it, but a little bit like a big cosmic joke, even the most serious things, because in the end, it's all going to collapse. I mean, it's all sort of very relative, but not intellectually, because they've been in that other state of consciousness. They may even still live in that state of consciousness while living here. So I think as more people, and I think more and more people are like at that state, because it's not like absolute. It can be relative. Like you can have little glimpses that, okay, you start to shake the foundation, what they say, shake the foundation of this egoic self. You're like, okay, I had that really deep experience. I couldn't be just this. So you're a little bit more relaxed, because this after you've integrated it. At first, it can be very discombobulating, and then the world becomes less serious to these people, and they tend to be you can help more in that state when you kind of know you're not kind of fully only here in the dream.
Wow. Thinking of the world that it will be when more and more people are that way. There's solutions that are created. Yes, we still have to come back and pay our taxes, but maybe when more and more people are aware of that, maybe there's something that replaces taxes. Maybe there's other ways of being on the planet. That could be the new earth that we're talking about. And that's why everyone watching this anyway is working towards this awakened state for as many people as possible, because it feels peaceful, and no stress, no fear, and beautiful. So, wow. Thank you for helping us all achieve this consciousness with these transmissions.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad. Yes, I think you're is exactly, I guess, the theme of the platform you've created, the new Earth, that more and more people are, in this state of awakening or enlightenment, and people might conceptualize it differently. And the other thing maybe to think about, or possibly, is that they've kind of that's in some of these spiritual literatures is as if like every lifetime is similar to like just waking up this morning, like you woke up and in some ways you got reincarnated back into your body. It was the same one yesterday, but it's as if you're in a new life in this new day. And a lot of some traditions, yogas, they actually practice that. Like when they come out of the dream state, it's the same as the bardo state, and when they wake up, it's the same as being reborn. And so, like, if you were to have that kind of very similar state of consciousness, every lifetime is a little bit like just waking up into a new day. And so you kind of, I think, ultimately, you're much more creative. And these, they call them tulkus in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. They are supposedly like the same soul reincarnating that they've identified, like the Dalai Lama is a tulku. He's the 14th identified sort of reincarnation of the same, I guess, consciousness. And so they had that supposedly capacity to choose, like not to necessarily stay in that relative, the inner world. They chose consciously to incarnate, and then they remember that. And so I think that's available to everyone, or everyone may even have that. They don't have to be some recognized person. They may have remembered themselves in other lifetimes, and they're coming back here, and so they recognize you're kind of existing at two levels, kind of this absolute spiritual awakened level, and then you have this relative vehicle that you're doing things with, kind of like in a dream state, or in the like a day, like this is your day, your life is a day, a cosmic day maybe.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, then we invite those watching and listening to join us for these transmissions and experience this awakened state of consciousness, and maintain a stability with it as best as we can. The Arcturians are here to help us with that. So let's experience a mini transmission.
Yeah, and we'll ask the Arcturians to help us enter that state where we're no longer thinking of something in the past or the future, or even in the present, like the commentary on what's going on, to enter kind of a pure awareness of the here and now. Okay. So it's very similar to what we would be doing on the second day of this. So we're starting the Arcturian awakening from the dream, from the past, the present, and the future. Starting with the first of 3 deepening cycles. And if you wanted to assist the experience, you can just tell yourself there's no past, no present, and no future. They're actually all thoughts happening in the present. Now we're entering a second deepening cycle. If you can think of a awakened master being who you feel very connected to, who you feel embodies the awakened state, you can just imagine them, their light body merging with your heart center. And then just be aware. Now we're entering a third deepening cycle. And that completes the transmission. When you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes, snap your fingers.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. In just those few moments, it was really incredible. I truly hope that everyone could sense that pure presence, really. It was the thinking of the guide, that was really very cool because that was palpable for me. And it was like I flipped a little bit where the no past, present, future, no thoughts going in between the gaps between the thoughts was held longer. And when thoughts did creep in, as they naturally did, I was so aware of them that it was easy just to flip back into the no thought. So that was luscious. I like to use that word luscious because it's almost like the bliss. And so we invite everyone to come and play with us and to experience this with us. There's something about the group energy as well that holds the container and assists all of us. And I know some would have a question as to what are they supposed to do with this? Well, it's helping us stabilize this state of consciousness even more in our life. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the complement to the trainings, again, that horizontal self where we're accumulating things, like we're getting better. Usually we're trying to get better or accumulate something in the horizontal personality, like whether it be a skill or an object and so forth. And then here to the personality self, it seems like there's nothing that you're gaining, but you're actually going deep into who you are. And so then you kind of can merge the two, because that kind of merging of the two makes you sort of more creative when you're in the horizontal dimension.
Yes, okay, I love that. So we're going to practice more of who we are, getting in tune or attuned into who we truly are in that vertical presence, that vertical dimension. Thank you, Jean. We also offer a bonus course with this, with the purchase of this. Does any come to mind of earlier courses to offer?
Yeah, maybe if we did, I know of every so often I'll do some kind of this type of non-dual awakening type work. Maybe we can find the non-dual type awakening course that would be sort of a way to introduce this one, which is sort of kind of the latest downloads on this aspect.
All right, so that's here on this webpage, and we look forward to seeing everyone for these 3 sessions. It really is family. It really is very interesting in the space. Before we even meet together, that's what makes it so fun and exciting. And again, it feels wonderful. The people who attend have transformational experiences. Their lives absolutely have changed for the better. And we invite those who are interested to join us. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.